I don't know how to describe it other than like a demon type of sound.
But it's silhouetted, hulking, every bit of 5.5 feet wide, 13 to 14 foot tall, pitch black.
The one thing that ran through my mind when I had this encounter was I don't have a big enough gun.
Your host, two-time witness and field researcher for more than 40 years, William Jevning. Welcome to Creek Devil.
Hello everyone, welcome to another edition of Creek Devil. We're going to do a 2-hour piece today. Forrest is with us, of course, this week. She's doing better after her horse chasing last weekend. And Tom, would you like to introduce our guest? We're going to talk to our guest first, then we'll do the Q&A later on. So,
yes, absolutely. We have Danny and Sarah. They're from Oregon, and Sarah's got some great background on the topic from her tribe, and Danny has a sighting. So we're going to bring them on. But before we do that, I want to thank everybody for for dialing in today. And if you like the show, let us know. Click the like and subscribe button if you haven't subscribed already. And if you want to support us, you can do so. We have a link for Patreon in the description. So I'm going to hand this off to Danny and Sarah and start from the beginning. Tell us about your Bigfoot encounter and just fill us in.
Well, thank you so much for the introduction, and we really appreciate the opportunity to speak to you today. So, and I had a really wonderful time talking to you on the phone the other night. I just wanted to say that. So, we go back to Livingston, Montana, 1999. At that time, I was definitely aware of Bigfoot and interested in all cryptozoology, but I had never really heard of Bigfoot in Montana. At that time, actually, I was under the impression that it was really only in the western United States and Harry and the Hendersons and, Gifford Pinchot National Forest and Washington and this thing. So I had never looked for Bigfoot ever in my life up to this point. But one of my, I was in a band, and the drummer of our band is Lakota. And so he and I had many, many conversations about Bigfoot. And then our bass player in the band, who I had the sighting with, is a geology major, anthropology minor. So he was a scientist, but at the time he was a fry cook scientist, but definitely somebody with a background in anthropology. And so I vividly recall having a conversation during practice one night about Bigfoot and about whether or not it could exist. And our friend was saying that, there's nothing in the fossil record and it's an impossibility. And so we definitely had conversation. So in 1999, we were touring and playing in all of the big cities of Montana, such as it is, long distances in between. We had played a show the night before, and we got up really early, I think because one of us had to go to work. But we got up really early and loaded up the van and started driving home. It was in August. The Big Sky Country has a strange almost illumination in the morning before the sun comes up. So it was an early morning sighting without the sun being fully up, but definitely bright enough to be able to see. We were headed on the interstate between Livingston and Bozeman, Montana. We were headed east to Livingston. I remember we were talking about breakfast. We're going to get some bacon, some biscuits and gravy, and we're just excited to almost be home. We are directly on the interstate. To our right is a frontage road, and then there is kind of grassy hills that go up. They're not mountains, they're hills. Livingston kind of sits right at the beginning of the plains. So this is a sparsely populated area with some trees, but it's pretty open. It's pretty wide open. And you would see lots of animals there, crazy amounts of animals, herds of deer that are mind-boggling. And so animals are just a really common sight there. So as we were headed down the highway, I noticed off to the right a seemingly very, very tall bipedal creature walking next to a cattle fence. This creature was, I would say, when I've Google Earthed it, is about 125 yards, let's say, from the highway that we were driving down. So I couldn't see facial features. I couldn't see the sex of the animal like Patty. I couldn't. It was just a really, really tall thing walking extremely fast, but also I remember the fluidity of it. I remember as I was watching it, thinking to myself, man, that thing is moving really fast, and look how smooth it's walking next to this fence. So to kind of paint a picture, I'm the driver of the van. My bass player anthropologist is the passenger of the van, and we are both seeing this thing at the same time. As I notice it, I kind of look forward and straighten the van. I'm pulling a trailer, so safety first and this kind of thing. But I kind of straighten the van, and I look back over and I see it walking. I kind of straighten the van again. I see it walking. I kind of straighten the van again. I keep seeing it walking. This van that I'm in is a cargo van, basically. So once it went past the driver or the passenger side window, we couldn't see anything else. And I was thinking to myself, did I just see that? And I said to my friend, hey man, did you just see that? And his exact words were, I don't know what you saw, but I think I just saw Chewbacca. I mean, really, honestly, it's the closest thing that I could ever compare it to at that distance. The color was a reddish brown color, so much like our friend from Star Wars that it's kind of mind-boggling. I think also at that point I had never really heard of a reddish Bigfoot or never really thought about them being different colors. So that was something that kind of stood out to me right away. And so for whatever reason, we could have stopped the van, we could have pulled over, and we could have watched this thing continue to walk a sizable distance. It was in a really wide open area in between two mountain passes. So in hindsight, and as I've looked at it on Google Earth, it seems apparent that it was moving from one of the mountain ranges to the other early morning. We got super lucky to be able to see this thing in a situation where it's unambiguous. It's either a Bigfoot or it's some kind of a bipedal something that is covered in fur. At the time of day, there was absolutely no possibility that it was like a person or someone trying to like hoax or prank. But clearly, after something like that happens to you, you go through all of those possible scenarios. You think about it. I mean, I still think about it all these years later. I think that for a while I was really obsessed by it. No, it's not. I don't think I was. I was completely obsessed by it for a long time. But now I have a different kind of feeling about it and a different understanding. And a big part of that is dating my Native American girlfriend. She's given me a lot of perspective and a lot of food for thought. And I'm a person who I think is really open to that and trying to understand what it was that we witnessed. I will tell you that my partner who was sitting next to me, who was the non-believer, I wouldn't say it's hyperbole to say that it shook him to his core. I think that for him, it was a very difficult thing for him to believe that he saw. I think that when we first had the sighting, in conversation, he wasn't sure. He didn't even want to admit it, which is just really strange to have something where you're sitting next to someone and you're seeing the same thing, and he almost didn't want to admit it to himself. But many years later, when we had a conversation, he has had time to process it, and now he's really good-natured and funny about it. But and believes that we both had a multiple witness sighting. Let's see. The one other thing that I just want to share about the sighting is that on the BFRO website, there's the geographical database. And when I went back to Montana last year and I got to go to my sighting location for the first time in 20 years, it was really an awesome experience for me. I was looking at the geographical database just to see if there had been anything around the area. In Park County, where my sighting happened, there hadn't been another sighting, I don't think, since mine. However, in the next county over, Gallatin County, just a couple of years ago, on Trail Creek, which is essentially where we had our sighting, there were multiple tracks found. And I have to tell you, that was over the moon exciting for me. I was, to have that corresponding evidence. It's not that it matters to me what anybody thinks about, when I talk to them about my sighting, and I do talk to people about it when I get the opportunity. It's more to have that kind of confirming piece of evidence just for myself, and to know that indeed they are everywhere on the entire planet. After you have that experience and you deep dive into it the way that I think a lot of people that have experiences do, it really becomes overwhelming when you think about what is really going on out there all over the entire planet. And so I feel blessed to have had this sighting in a location where it's unambiguous and there's no question. And at the same time, sometimes when I talk to people about it and they are so sure that they can't or don't exist, it's a very strange place to be, to know for a fact that someone is wrong, to know for a fact that every single time I go out in the woods, I could have another opportunity and another encounter. The last thing I want to say about that is, in my 20 years since my sighting, I have been out countless hours in the wilderness, and I've never found a thing. I've never found another track. We've seen things that were strange out there for sure, but nothing that I could say for sure was and so that's interesting to me too. It somewhere in there is the answer, and I don't think that anybody has it. And I think that's why I love the subject so much. It's a never-ending adventure, and it's free. That's the best part. Going into the woods is free, and everybody should do that as often as they possibly can, in my humble opinion. So
Danny, that's a really good perspective. Quick question. Do you ever kick yourself for not stopping the van?
Oh, well, that's like, I mean, you see this across the board with people that have UFO sightings, people that have Bigfoot sightings. They're holding a camera and they don't take the picture for whatever reason. Of course, yes, that is. And I don't know why that happened. I really don't know and don't understand why it happened. And frankly, without embracing the woo part of it, I don't have an answer for it. So, and there's two of us. Neither one of us said, "Hey, pull over the van. Let's just, this might be something to watch. Let's check this out." And not only that, but our Lakota drummer, is asleep between us. He has a Bigfoot tattooed on him at that point. I mean, the fact that I didn't wake him up, the fact that I didn't share with him, is something that is, it kind of is heartbreaking in a way, because
Has he forgiven you yet?
Oh, well, he's my research partner, and we spend all of our time out there in the woods together. So what I hope happens now is that he's going to be looking to the left and he has a sighting while I'm looking to the right, and I'll miss it completely, and then we'll both be equal and even.
There you go. That's a good perspective. You and I talked a little bit about the height of the fence, and I did some research. I took a look at the state of Montana. They actually have ordinances, statewide ordinance on minimum and maximum height of the fence. And the maximum height of the fence, if I read it correctly, I think, and this was what, like one of those wire fences?
Yes.
Okay, and probably a strand of barbed wire at top. Were the posts, and I'm asking you for details, 20 years ago, do you remember if the posts were those red and white ones, or are they wooden, or do you even remember?
I'm going to say that they were wooden, because when we were there this last year, we had scoped it out pretty good. Of course, okay. we're looking from the frontage road, and it's on private property.
Yeah.
But I do believe that they are wood.
Okay. Yeah. I asked only because back 100 years ago. I used to build fences. So, so the height of the fence is 48 inches, according to Montana. If I read it right, their ordinance. And so that's, we got a 4-foot fence. How much taller than the fence was this thing?
Yes. So what I noticed was, as it was fluidly walking next to the fence, its hands, as they swung back and forth, seemed to be at the top of that fence. So when they were at their, 6 o'clock lowest position, they're at the top of the fence. Of course, people are notoriously bad witnesses, and I'm driving 70 miles an hour. So this is my recollection of it, actually at the time, because, when it happened, I felt like it was a really important thing for me to report it to someone. I don't really know why, other than because I had no frame of reference for it being in Montana. I thought that was an important thing and someone should know about it. So at that time is the very beginning of the internets, and I did log into the BFRO, and they did categorize my sighting. It's in Park County, Montana, if anybody would like to read it. Van driver and passenger have Bigfoot sighting. And so I'm really thankful that I did that, because that is imprinted. The story is as it happened in 1999, as I could recall it. So really, all these years later, I kind of am just recalling that same story, but I'm really thankful that you get locked in on that, because obviously we all want to know the truth, but the truth of the matter really is I cannot give a true estimate, because
you do your best.
Yes, that's right.
Best guess.
That's right.
And you got it memorialized, so that's fantastic. I want to ask Forrest real quick to jump in, because your buddy, who's a anthropology minor and geology major, his whole, before seeing this, his argument was, well, there's nothing in the fossil record. Forrest, what are your thoughts about, because a lot of people ask us that, well, there's nothing in the fossil record for Bigfoot. What's your professional opinion?
Well, we don't have exactly, we don't have a fossil record for an animal exactly like Bigfoot. Of course, everybody knows about Gigantopithecus blackie, and that is over in the China area. And I think most anthropologists accept the fact that they probably were an orangutan type and were quadrupedal rather than bipedal. Of course, all primates at some point in time stand up and walk on 2 legs for short distances. But there is fossil records that they are finding in North America for primates and lemur types and prosimian types. So there is a fossil record for smaller animals. Nothing that leads us to believe that there was any type of gigantism going on, but who's to say what we'll find in the future? I mean, things are coming, are discovered all the time. And like I told you before, I have to keep reading up on the stuff, because, I mean, so many things that have been found since I went to school, and that we never even knew anything about when I was going to school. So you have.
What about an explanation? What about an explanation for something that exists in the past but didn't leave fossil evidence behind, or we haven't discovered the fossil evidence yet? Is that a valid assumption, or what are your thoughts on that?
Well, of course, it's a valid assumption. I mean, look at man. We don't have any, we've cut so many missing gaps in the evolution of man, and we don't even know where some of the fossils that we have found figure into the record. And, there's so many things. When you find a fossil, what you're looking at is a representation of thousands, maybe millions of specimens that are out there. You have to have absolutely perfect conditions for fossilization to occur. I mean, you can look at it all the time with the dinosaur record. I mean, they find these, and those were huge animals versus these smaller primate animals. And so to find anything in the fossil record is sometimes just luck. And like I say, you have to have absolutely special conditions for this fossil to occur. And when we found fossils, that's exactly what they are. They're special conditions. And usually it's only one individual. So,
okay, so
it's tricky.
You know,
yeah, right. It's tricky. What are some of those conditions? I would think because when you find a fossil, you're not finding the actual.
It's got to be buried
creature
immediately, in usually dry conditions.
The dry conditions, I think, is the key thing, because if it's true that Bigfoot sightings correlate with locations of rainfall, and I'm not a scientist, but it seems like a wet forest would be a really difficult place for.
Well, here's my input. I went to the archaeological field school and worked on a couple of digs. And one of the things they talked about were the kinds of conditions where fossilization occurs. And typically where there are forests, like in North America, or jungles, those conditions are very, very poor for fossilization, if they occur at all.
Well, they're acid. A lot of the forest regions, the soil is very acid,
right,
and that is not conducive for fossilization at all.
Right, exactly.
Okay, I want to shift gears a little bit. I want to bring Sarah in on this. And Sarah, you've got some absolutely wonderful lore and history, tribal history of the creatures. But I want to start off with kind of a funny story that you and Danny had, that you're sitting on the back porch of your house, and I believe this was on the reservation.
Yes.
And Danny whistled, and you just thought that was a fantastic idea, or not?
Yeah, not so much. Well, first, thank you for having me. I just wanted to give a brief introduction. I'm Sarah, and I am an enrolled member of the Confederated Tribes of Grand Ronde. I am Chinook, Umpqua, Rogue River, Kalapuya, as well as Cree with some Cherokee. And I have grown up with traditions and storytelling. I'm also a tribal ethnobotanist, so I also spend a lot of time in the forest gathering, looking for medicines and foods, and play a role in helping others explore those items and things as well in the tribal community. So my connection to the forest and to these things is a sacred action, and I take my role very seriously in making sure that this information is protected and respected in the utmost way possible. So I do appreciate you having me here to help shed some light on it and give some Indigenous perspective in an area that is a place where my family and my community has been since time immemorial. Okay, and tell us, recount the story of the whistle, because I love that story. Well, we were on my back patio. We were actually in the hot tub. It was late at night. We were having a relaxing night after a hard day at work. It was dark. The stars were out. And we had just got done talking about some of these things, tribal traditions and Bigfoot, of course. And
but first you should tell them you're not really even allowed to talk about that at night. So she was already on edge and I was gently pushing, and we were having conversation. But at this moment, so she was already a little bit on edge.
There are some tribal taboos about when these stories should come out and things that should happen around them. So it made me very nervous. So we were getting into it probably more than I had been comfortable with anyway. And Danny decided that he, in his adventurous spirit and his search for information and knowledge, that he wanted to put some of these things to the test. And he let out a large whistle, and I jumped straight out of the hot tub and ran right into the house.
And why would that be?
Well, we believe that there are ways that our friends are called to us or pay extra attention to us. And one of those ways is through whistling or calling out to them, calling their name, naming them specifically. We have some indigenous names for them that we keep sacred, and some nicknames that we use to kind of work around that in a way. Our communities have had relationships with our friends for a really long time. We believe that they've been around since time immemorial, and they're probably older than human beings. And we've had relationships with them since we came into existence. And that includes agreements with how we are treated and how we treat them. Some might call those treaties. And among those things is that we don't call out their name, because they could come to us and invite trouble. There are stories in the Pacific Northwest about them taking children or women as slaves and raising them, keeping them in their communities. And there are stories also about some of the humans escaping and coming back to their human villages with stories of their captivity. Some of the women having had children with them. And these are really, really old stories and traditions. So these are things that are passed down, and we make sure that our children understand that we have to treat these things as sacred.
So the interaction isn't always positive. It can be negative with these things.
Right. The majority of the time, it's not something that we want to invite into our lives.
And if you were out, I was fascinated when I first met her that she was out in the middle of the woods by herself, staying the night in her car, gathering the next morning. And that would mean that if you were gathering and one was there, you wouldn't even address it or look at it or pay attention to it.
No, we would leave the area. We would make sure that they understood that we were giving them space and respect, and we would go somewhere else.
Do you know who Tom Seward is?
No.
He's a native fellow we've had on a couple of times from Vancouver Island, and he talks quite a bit about the Chonaqua and other names he's used. Mm-hmm. And that's what he said, that typically, and Forrest would agree with this, a primate will let you know if they don't want you around. And these guys will too.
Sure.
And he said basically to back out the way you came and leave and respect them.
Yes.
Have we ever run into a situation like that, Will? I'm just trying to
We did in
think
September,
here.
you bet. And we left very quickly.
Yeah, we had about a 5 second, just a very few second. It was a Democratic meeting. It was unanimous.
We loaded up in the trucks and beat feet.
But everybody wants that experience.
But it was
right? That's what everybody wants.
Right. It was very clear. I've had both kinds. There are basically two kinds of experiences. You have the up close and personal one, and I did that when I was 16 with two of them. Not a happy experience. And the second one, I was in a car and it was across this river, and it disappeared very quickly. But we all got to see it. That's the one everybody wants. But the first one is the one you typically have.
Well, obviously, all these years later, to think about a sighting that is once again unambiguous is really a blessing, and I don't think it's the norm for everyone. So, and when Sarah and I go out into the woods, COVID gave us a lot of opportunity to. At the time I was a restaurant manager, so we were shut down and we're on the reservation. We were exploring her tribal lands and spending as much time out in the woods as possible. Although the area where she, just for what it's worth, her tribal lands, a lot of that are being worked. So it's a lot of timber and a lot of trucks.
Is that
and it's
in
kind of,
western Montana near the Flathead Reservation?
No, that's here in Oregon.
Oh, in Oregon. I'm sorry.
Yep.
I don't think I explained that. We actually, the band moved from Montana out to Oregon in 2000. So right after that happened.
Oh, I see. Okay.
And once I came out here, that was when I was really obsessed. And I spent so much time, especially in the Mount Hood National Forest and my favorite place in the world, which is the Dark Divide, the area between Mount St. Helens and Mount Adams, the Gifford-Pinchot National Forest. So, but this location is to the west of Portland and a little southwest.
Oh, okay. Yeah. I used to live in Vancouver, so I'm familiar with the area.
Yes, yes. A lot of interesting too. It's that Tillamook National Forest is a lot of north-south, very big canyon-y type areas. And when you Google Earth it, it's especially Oregon. You see the clear cuts right away as you zoom in. But this area, in particular, near Hebo, is an area that's very dense and not a lot of clear cuts. But it's also really hard to get back in there. So. And because my sighting happened from a vehicle, I spend as much time driving on back roads as I do getting out and hiking. Although we have just lost a whole lot of weight on a low-carb diet. So this summer I am ready to get out there and start hitting some hills, because last year when I went out there with my lovely girlfriend, I was sucking air, and that's a little embarrassing. So this year I might even lead the pack. We did have one curious thing that I will mention happened to us this last summer out in her tribal lands. We were looking for, we could tell there was a ridge, and that this ridge was going to have this amazing view, and you can access it right from the logging road. The gates are closed, but you can walk back in there. And so we were walking in, and I was sucking air, and we saw this really steep logging road, and so we started going up, and it was pretty far. It was, I'm not going to say a quarter mile, but it felt like a mile to me at my 365 pounds at the time. And when we finally got up there, we realized that, this is not the spot to be able to see the really good view. We're going to have to walk back down and go around, and so we kind of had a plan.
And of course, this entire time we've been talking about what we might see, and Danny has a propensity for whistling, and hooting. So and I sing a lot in the woods, and I like to make up whimsical lyrics, and I'm just kind of it's just the kind of guy I am. And so we were definitely, yes, it was on our mind as we were walking back down this very steep road, and it's forested on both sides. It's really thick, some old growth trees, and then a lot of brush and cover, and you can't see 5 feet in. It's dark in there.
And it's dark in there too. Midday, yes. We're in the middle of the sun, but where we are is, kind of one of those dark areas. So as we're stepping back down this steep road, we hear a tree break that was maybe the loudest tree break I have ever heard in my life. And it was 10 feet from us off the side of the road, and we both stopped and looked at each other, and that frozen. And I'm a baseball fan, so I know what a really good crack of the bat sounds like. I mean, that's what this was. It was so, and I think Sarah kind of, she knows that not only are they out there, but there are other things out there too. And so to her, she just kind of looks at me like, see what you get. So that was a pretty cool thing that happened. Who knows what it was, but
it did sound like a branch was being broken, not falling out of a tree. We know what tree branches falling sounds like. We know what crunching leaves and crunching branches sound like when deer or elk are moving through. We know what bears sound like when they're scratching on trees or huffing around. And this was a branch being broken. And that was it. And the birds were silent. There was no other sound in the woods.
It went silent, completely silent, still. And it was.
I want to interject for just a second. I know exactly what you're talking about. I experienced that for the first time. Oh gosh, not quite a month ago. in the Lower Cascades with a friend, and we're hiking up there, and I heard this loud crack, and thought about it for about 2 seconds. Like, hey, why don't we head back to the truck? Like 5 seconds ago. I know the feeling.
Well, we did make it to the vista, and it was gorgeous. And actually, there's a really awesome spot where I have heard the biggest echo that I've ever heard in my life. And I've lived lots of places and seen lots of things, but this area, you can actually, I was doing some daytime calling, which is acceptable, and just kind of making noise out there to see if I could get anything to stir. And actually, we did. We had there were a bunch of elk that were bedded down, and they all ran across a hill. That's probably a half mile away from where we were down this draw. I always use those opportunities to try to grab my phone and film that, or anytime we see any kind of anything out in the woods, because especially in Oregon, it's not like Montana in the sense that I don't think that we see the same types of herds. Although in the area that Sarah's tribe is, there is a very, very large elk herd, and I've always heard that where the elk go, our friends go. I don't know if that's true or not, but I've always heard that, and so anytime they're around,
They follow the game.
Yes.
Well, of course, yeah, yes. Well, we did these echoes up there, and you could hear this going throughout the entire forest, and one has to wonder, especially if you're up there at night. I always threaten to do that, but then I don't have anybody that wants to go out with me out there at night. And then it's also, a good mile walk back in. So after you've let everything in the entire forest know you're there, then they can come and watch you walk out, and I don't know about that. So it seems like a good idea in the daytime.
I have a comment, though, again, referring to Tom Seward when we had him on. He talked about, Tom, I don't know if you remember, he talked about a couple of native fellas who were out. I don't remember what they were doing, but they hollered out, they said, Soka, Soka. And the creatures on the ridge above them echoed it back to them. I don't know if what that actually means. I believe that's in Chinook.
Yeah, we have a couple different names. I'm not familiar with that one.
What about the words Soka, Soka?
That's what I was thinking.
No.
No, okay.
I don't know.
But also, you have lots of bands that are considered cousins that have maybe their own different dialects, but that you could still communicate with each other.
Absolutely. So Chinook Wawa is the trade language of the Confederated Tribes of Grand Ronde, and so it's a conglomeration, and it's a language that was used up and down the Pacific Northwest. That's the language that I speak and my family speaks, and so there may be some words that originate in other tribal communities that we don't use within our context, especially up on Vancouver Islands. But we did have the trade language, which is what we use, that used a lot of different. It also includes some French and English, but
I was just going to ask that. Yeah, that was a trade language.
Yes, and so a lot of the different tribal communities had words and contributions to that language to make it a universally understood method of communication.
I just thought it was interesting that they would say that, they would holler that, and then they would get response back from the creatures.
Sure.
Well, and one of the things Sarah kind of addressed, but I just wanted to share because I've found this so fascinating. There's a lot of question about, people wonder, are these, are they apes? Are they people? Or what are they exactly? And she had mentioned about the treaties, and the story is that the treaties were put in place to keep them from basically taking their people, but you don't make treaties with apes. You make treaties with intelligent creatures that are able to understand. And the idea of that to me is just fascinating.
And that's where I think Forrest would have an opinion on that.
I have a healthy respect for the indigenous people's beliefs, and would never be the one to say that I disrespect that. My personal opinion, and like I always say, we know what opinions are. I believe that they're an ape. Apes though exhibit a high degree of intelligence. I mean, we've got Coco, the gorilla that actually spoke sign language. She was taught it, and she, for a long time, people thought that we were the only one that had, the humans were the only ones that could formulate abstract thinking. And Coco most definitely proved that incorrect, because she actually related to her handlers and stuff stories about when she was a small infant, that she remembered her mother, and told stories about being in Africa before she was captured. So I still hold with the premise that they're apes, but the level of intelligence is far superior, I think, than even your gorillas or your chimpanzees. But I have always talked that I think with their behavior that they are more akin to the chimpanzees. And chimpanzees can be taught sign language, and they even have learned how to use computers. So, I think that we're learning things all the time about our fellow primates. And a lot of people don't like to think of ourselves as being primates, but we are. I always say we're the naked ape. So, and I find, if I can interject something, that I find it, I had to laugh when she said she jumped out of the hot tub when the whistling occurred. And I think that there is a lot going on there with the whistling. And I even told Tom about something that I had come across, and I had never known about this. And it's in La Gomera on the Canary Islands. And I don't know if you ever got a chance to look at that, Tom, but it's a small island off the chain of the Canary Islands. And these people, I mean, everybody should go out there and look at this. These people communicate by whistling. They actually formulate entire sentences by the intonations of their whistling. And I mean, I had to watch it over and over and over again. I was totally fascinated with it. So I think that there is a lot more to the whistling of these primates, of the Bigfoot, than we understand. So, but like I say, that's my opinion, and we know what opinions are. So.
Well, I do want to say that I appreciate your sensitivity, and I don't think that the ideas that we're sharing are exclusive. I think it's important to note that Indigenous communities do believe that all animals have intelligence, and that we have stories that reach back to the time before humans, where animals could talk, and then the time when humans came into existence, and we had communication with animals in different aspects and different characters throughout history. And so the idea that these friends would be any different is not an exclusive or exclusionary concept. So whether they're apes or not, I can't say, because that's not my area of expertise. But we believe that there's intelligence across the board, and I think that they can exist in both of those categorizations and still be true, if that makes sense.
Yeah, good point.
No, it does, and I totally agree with you.
And I want to comment on the. We get a lot of reports. I mean, and we're not the only ones. There's a lot of people that have heard. And one of the guys, we had Gerald on, and he was a police officer up in Washington, and his boss, the chief, where these things will actually mimic people perfectly. They do an excellent job of mimicking. And his chief was out elk hunting one time with his son. Gerald wasn't with them at this time, and they heard Gerald's voice off in the woods calling them. And I believe he's either calling them or calling the dog. But we get a lot of people that have reported hearing human voices that were obviously, mimicked, and they would hear, like, for example, they'd hear their own voice, maybe calling a dog or a child or something like that. So there's another interesting aspect to ponder.
Sure. And I want to just play devil's advocate a little bit. And again, from an indigenous perspective, that, without the evidence that people want from a scientific perspective, we can attribute that to our friends, or we can think about how maybe there are also other things out there that we don't know about or don't recognize scientifically, and that we would believe that some of those things occur because of other entities or other beings also in the same realm of not being yet discovered by science. So I would just throw that out there as something for consideration as well.
Yeah, we did talk about that a little bit, that there's Bigfoot and there's other things.
Sure.
Well, didn't they have in Hanabi, Oklahoma, weren't they having the same incidences occurring, that they were actually mimicking the individuals there?
Well, I guess to preface that, I was one of the people that interviewed Mike from Hanobia, and a number of years back, and since then I found out that some of the stuff was actually manufactured. So some of the story is real, some of it wasn't. So I don't really know, if that was accurate, but I have heard it from other people, though. Personally, I've never heard him, speak. I've heard him chatter, and one even made sounds like a chimp. It wasn't like a chimp, but it was the closest thing I could come to it. It was more of a hooting, and it was very agitated. The other one was kind of just chattering. There was no discernible words, but it was making a clear chattering noise.
Well, what I had told y'all that I heard on my property here sounded like somebody was off in the woods speaking Chinese or something.
Yeah.
That's what it sounded like to me. It was almost an Oriental type language.
I would say that. That's kind of what the chattering resembled.
Samurai chatter. We've heard of that before.
Well, now they use that term with the Sierra sounds, and personally, I don't really, I don't really think that's real myself. But the chattering certainly, or like you said, that more of an Asian language sound.
Well, the unfortunate thing is that you've got a lot of stuff that's been said, and sometimes you wonder what's real and what's not.
Exactly.
So, you have to kind of be step back and take an overall. Okay, what exactly is going on here?
Yeah, I mean, you have to be skeptical. You really do.
Yeah. Well, and I think everybody should go into it with a healthy skepticism.
Absolutely.
Don't just swallow everything that's told to you. Hook, line, and sinker.
Skeptics are my favorite people.
Oh, why not?
They really are. I really enjoy talking to skeptics. True skeptics, not debunkers, but skeptics.
Yeah, exactly. Sarah, you shared an interesting story. When you're a teenager, you're driving along, and I can't remember if you whistled or made a sound or said something out the door, and the comment you said was you're being teenagers, kind of, just doing what they do. So tell us that story.
Yes. So I grew up on the Colville Reservation in high school. And of course, we would go out joyriding at night on the dark roads. And as teenagers do, we were also looking for trouble and adventure ourselves and just pushing the limits. So one of those things was to test the stories and the things that we were taught as children. One of those things is the whistle that you're not supposed to do at night. And we were driving down a dark back road on the reservation, and somebody encouraged me to roll down the window, and we were going very slow, roll down the window and make a whistle. So I did, and we were going slow enough, that we could see everything moving really slowly past us. You could hear the crickets in the brush, sagebrush country, high desert plateau in eastern Washington. And as I sent my whistle out, and not more than 3 to 5 seconds later, I had an exact replica of the whistle come right back in the window. the window went right up and we sped off. So we never did that again. And that's why I jumped out of the hot tub that night.
That must have been a little.
25 years later.
That must have been a little unsettling, huh?
Oh, heavens. What we do as teenagers.
Right. So I tested that theory and it came out true. So that's why I encourage.
That's a way to validate what you were told.
Right.
But I love the description, looking for trouble and adventure. Those two go hand in hand
And
sometimes.
you found it.
Yeah. And we found it.
Yeah, be careful what you ask for.
Indeed.
Exactly.
So I'm curious about the reservation you said is Eastern Washington, and Will and I have talked about Mount Adams. On the western side is it's pretty lush and green. On the eastern side, I think Will, isn't that
still
the
pretty
beginning
timbered.
of the Yakima?
That's the Yakima.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. And was this close to that area at all, Sarah? Or?
Oh no, you're
No,
quite
the
a ways
Culver
away.
Reservation is about 90 minutes west of Spokane, up north.
Oh, okay. So way out there.
Mm-hmm. The Grand Coulee Dam area.
I'm trying to think. Is that near the little town of Bossburg by chance?
No, it would be like Elmer City, Grand Coulee,
Okay.
Coulee Dam.
Okay.
The Grand Coulee Dam is the biggest tourist spot there. That would be the kind of the pinpoint for people to recognize the area.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Bossburg is north of Colville, and so that is that reservation area. But I was further south towards the Coulee Dam area.
Lots of sightings in that region.
Is that northeast?
Oh yeah, look, that's right in the.
Mm-hmm. It's that. What's that town? We're looking at a map here, so I can familiarize myself. Yeah, so
I
it's,
just want to jump in.
Northeast Washington.
yeah, Bossburg is like the north east corner of the reservation.
Sarah, you disappointed me a little bit because I always felt that, if I wanted to go to a place where I could camp and relax and not have to worry about these things, it'd be Eastern Oregon, which is basically the same as Eastern Washington.
Right.
Sagebrush country.
Tom, you're way off.
And they're there.
You got to remember Jason in Arizona. Got tons of stuff going on there.
But I'm always looking for a place where they're not.
You're gonna have to go to Hawaii.
But watch out for the mini hooey.
We've had this discussion, Tom.
We have, yes, we have. And that's actually, it produced some pretty good results in the September area.
It did.
Going to where they're not.
Right.
But they were.
They were.
It's a long story.
So I guess the question is, were they there because you were there?
No.
Okay.
We already knew they were there.
Oh, I see.
And they didn't like us
the
there.
thing it is the fun part about it once you have had an experience and she was saying that she had an experience on her own property. That's the dream for me, at least. When I spent that time the last year out in Grand Ronde in a old growth forested area where every night you have the opportunity for some kind of something to happen is pretty all right.
Wait, Danny, did you say that was a dream to have them on your own property or a nightmare?
Yeah, I guess it goes either way.
Depends which one of us you're talking to.
Right.
Danny, you don't want that.
Don't want that.
You don't want to be the happy meal.
No.
But I will
now,
tell
You
Forrest,
don't want to be worrying about being the happy.
Right.
Forrest, have you had any experiences with them on your property?
That's a rhetorical
Oh,
question.
heavens to Betsy, Tom. Well, I haven't had any lately, and I have to laugh because my daughter laughs at me when I say that. Well, Mom, you're the anthropologist. I thought that you would be wishing that. And I'm like, yeah, well, maybe when I was 25, not so much now that I've hit my 60s. So, we all know the story about me waking up and having my air conditioner shaking and then looking out the window at this huge hulking black mass outside my window. And so, yes, I mean, I could recount all the occasions that I've had things happen here. And that would, as well, you know, that's another show. So, but I will interject something though. When Danny and Sarah were talking about hearing the branches breaking and such, and Tom's reaction when he heard the branches breaking would have been my reaction. That would be time to leave, because that is a very common thing for chimpanzees and gorillas to do. Of course, gorillas aren't near as aggressive, and most of their charges and stuff are all false charges, but just trying to scare you away, but not so much for chimpanzees. You know my feelings about chimpanzees, Tom and Will. Anyway, that y'all going on and keep walking. You kept walking after you heard that. You're a braver soul than me, because once you hear that, that's usually when they're very unhappy with you. And they're trying to give you an indication that you need to be elsewhere other than where you're at. So I would have, at that point in time, been the coward and turned around and went back down the hill. So, you know, but that's just me.
Well, we did move on. I guess it wasn't clear when we told our story. We were coming down a short road, and we ended up going to a different space to finish our hike. So yes, we would not. Okay. We definitely did not stick around to make any more trouble.
Well, and as much as maybe I would have, I don't want her to ever. I would never want my hobby to change the way that she views being out in the woods. And honestly, I'm want to protect her. I don't want her to feel scared or nervous or any of those things. And I know that at that moment I was like, because all I could think about is, what kind of arm strength does it take to break a branch like that? I mean, really? So I think that, yeah, we definitely
moved on.
And I think it's more just the fact that she's like, see, I told you. And so,
you know, it reminds me of a friend of mine from the Klamath Reservation. He's quite a character. And the first time I found that, where they would snap trees that were, 3+ inches thick, like they were twigs, I showed him pictures, and he kind of chuckled, and he says, "Oh, you finally found that?" I said, "What do you mean I finally found that?" He said, "Yeah, that's a territorial marking." He says, or in the case of the ones we found, they were in a line. He said, that's the big guy telling the rest of them where we're going to feed next. And I said, oh, it would have been nice knowing that a little sooner. And he says, well, there's no fun in that. You need to find out for yourself.
Yes, that's right. Well, and it's fascinating on that way out to the Oregon coast through the Grand Ronde tribe. There's a big casino out there. So there are people that live all the way across, and there have been sightings all across that interstate as long as it's been there.
Oh, that whole region, very active.
That whole and people live. It always fascinates me to think about how close they are and how they seemingly are able to move in and out of rural type neighborhoods and get right up to your house and able to shake an air conditioner. I mean, that is just and then also able to slip away and have 3/4 of the population not even believe that it's even a possibility, or that is just, it's something that's, so when we were sitting in her backyard out there at night, it just stands to reason that yes, I could give them a reason to want to come up and see me. I don't know if it works that way, but why not? What I always felt like, what do I have to lose, until I found out that
what do you have to lose? They may show up and they may not leave when you want them to.
Well, and they can get very close to you without you knowing it. I had one 2 feet behind me when I was a teenager and didn't know it. We told the story about the Clark Ranch a number of times, but we were out in an area where we heard there was a lot of screaming going on. The family there said, sure, you can go out there. We're not going. We hiked out there and set up our tent, had a fire going. one of the guys wanted to go to bed, so we said, "Oh, go in the tent. We're going to sit up and listen." And we heard the rustling around and going on, and we're joking about him in there, and pretty soon he about tears the tent down coming out. And he said, "It isn't very funny, you guys messing with me." So we, he said that he thought one of us grabbed him and tried pulling him out of the tent. And I said, "Well, great idea, but we didn't think of it. If this really happened, there has to be proof because the ground was pretty soft back there." And we took a flashlight, and sure enough, there were 18-inch footprints leading from the tent going back into the woods. And this thing had come and knelt down right behind me and was reaching under the edge of the tent and was apparently rummaging through our stuff and grabbed a hold of him and let go when it realized it was a live body that it had. But I never heard anything, and it was that close.
Well, I didn't walk in your house with you not even knowing it. So
yes, yes, you
yes,
know that from experience.
I know that from experience. I still bear the scar on my forehead from that little experience. So yeah. Mm-hmm. And why I'm still here, I don't know.
Well, I guess they just decided you weren't what they wanted at the moment.
I didn't look too tasty that night.
Not too tasty, right. It was just mad that you didn't leave the can opener out.
I know. Oh, heavens to Betsy.
That must have been why they came around the Clark Ranch, because we cooked beans. That's what we had for our dinner that evening. We didn't share.
Oh. Well, my scraps I take way out in the pasture now. I don't. And every morning they're gone. So but I don't know. It could very well be raccoons and possums that are getting it. But like I say, I haven't in the last couple of months had anything going on here. But then this time of the year is when it gets quiet. So right. And then the fall it'll start up again.
We talked to a guy last night from Maine who we'll have on next week's show. But he bought property, and apparently it was very unusual. Of course, you'll get to hear that when you listen to the episode about the deal he got on the property, and unknowingly the creatures were there. So he had an experience that lasted about a month and a half, then they disappeared. And that was August, September. So I said, well, keep your eyes open this coming August and September, because they're cyclic, and in a lot of places they'll come back, most likely.
Well, and we've had so many fires here in Oregon, vast areas, and one has to wonder how that will affect.
They take advantage of those a lot of times. They're familiar with fire. They've been around them forever. And I'll give you an example. I had a friend who was a CAL FIRE captain here in California. He's retired now, but he messaged me when there was a pretty large fire going just north of here. And he said that he and another one of the captains they were having a discussion one evening, and it was just kind of behind the scenes where they were doing food drops and things like that, some other maintenance kinds of things going on. And they watched one of these things sneak up on their food drop and apparently grabbed what it wanted and left. Another time, again, I was at the Klamath Reservation in Southern Oregon, and Gerald Skelton, who was the head of the cultural committee at the time, was telling me that there was a native fire crew working this fire, and one of the creatures they were sweeping the line, I guess, for hot spots, and one of the creatures come running out of the fire, and its hair smoldering, and it fell down amongst these guys who were, looking for hot spots. Of course, they were a little shook up, and it left handprints, and it got up and ran off. And somebody cast the prints, and they were on display for many years, and then the prints vanished. But others have seen them, take advantage of the wildlife, frantically running from the fire to grab an easy meal. So I don't think they're too shook up by it. And one of the effects of fires is you'll note that the next year there's a lot of green vegetation growing from a fire. And that attracts all the animals that eat the plants. So it attracts them too, because they're eating the animals that eat the plants.
Mm-hmm.
Fascinating ecosystem.
It's very interesting. Tom had to step away for a moment, but We're kind of running.
No, Tom's
Oh,
here.
there he is. We're running a little short on time, Tom. I don't know if you wanted to have anything else to ask.
No, but I did want to thank Danny and Sarah for coming on the show, and I always thank Forrest. We love your input. And Danny and Sarah, don't be strangers. Stay in touch with us.
Absolutely.
And if you get any new contacts or if you have questions or anything like that, never hesitate to reach out to us. You got our email address. So again, I just want to extend a big hearty thank you from Creek Devil to you guys. Thanks a bunch.
And if you'd like, contact me and I can send you some sign to watch for also.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for your time today. We had a really, really fun time.
We appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
It was nice talking to you.
You as well, Forrest. Bye-bye.
All right. Bye-bye.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Creek Devil. If you or anyone you know has had an encounter with these creatures, please contact us at williamjevning@yahoo.com. That's William, Jevning, @yahoo.com. All communication is confidential. Join us for another program next week. And until then, keep your eyes open now.